Parents on Reddit, what was your I raised an idiot moment? He knew there was a frozen pizza in the garage, but couldn't find it. Didn't even think to check the freezer. When they mistook a leaky radiator hose for smoke. No problem, it kind of looks the same. They continued to drive the car home thinking it was on fire, then pulled it into the garage that is attached to the house. At age 15, at the market, she was asked to get a large chicken, and she came back with a turkey. When I asked her to return the turkey and get a large chicken, she revealed that she thought that turkeys were literally adult chickens, and that chickens were young turkeys. As parents, we try to teach our kids everything they need to know, but it's hard to see the gaps sometimes. I haven't, and I hope I don't have to, but my dad said almost exactly that line in reference to my brother. My dad told me about a conversation they had that went like this as best I remember. When his third child was born and looked nothing like him, I told him he should get a DNA test, and he told me he wished he could, but it was too late. I asked what he meant, and he said by now all the DNA would have mixed, and there would be no way to tell who the child's father was. After I explained how DNA works to him, he still didn't believe me. When I asked him why he wouldn't just try on the off chance I was right, that rather than being on the hook for child support for a child he had literally seen for 12 hours total over the first year of its life, he said it's just 21 more years anyhow, why waste my time? I heard a noise in my kitchen, and I went in there and there was flour all over the floor and all over my kid, and he was like, not me, but I think it probably was him. My 13-year-old son was sniffing really hard and moving his head all around the area he was standing in. Slightly concerned he had lost his mind, I asked him what he was doing. He told me, I farted. I'm trying to smell it all up, so you don't have to smell it. He's a thoughtful idiot. I had my sister text my mom that she forgot her phone at home. I'm the idiot. I registered for college and spelled my middle name wrong, but didn't notice for 4 years, since they always abbreviated to my initial. I was showing my parents my diploma before walking on graduation day and my mom just stared at me like I was special. Bonus points, I actually thought that was how it was spelled. Definitely not an idiot, but I love this story about my kid. I used to pay the guy who took care of the yard for me by writing a check, putting it in a baggie, and sticking it under the mat. One weekend I was on the phone while writing the check, so I asked my son to put the check in the baggie under the mat for me. I went on with the conversation and forgot about it. A few days later, the guy who takes care of the lawn calls me up and says he looked everywhere but can't find the check. While we are talking, I open the door and lift up the mat, and no check. He says, "You are really great customers." So I was surprised that the check wasn't there. I was surprised too. I look around, behind bushes, under a decoration, no check. Then, I try to think like my son. I look under the mat inside the front door, and there's the check. We still laugh about it. When I ask my 14-year-old if she could please bring me a piece of cake, she cut it, forgot why, then ate it. I used to tell my kids not to take off their shoes and socks in the car, especially on short trips. Just leave them on so that we don't have to spend 5 minutes finding and putting them back on before we run into the store. Imagine a single dad with 2 young kids running around the car trying to reshoe my children in the grocery store parking lot in the middle of an Arizona summer. Yuck. One day we went to the store and my daughter was missing her shoe. It was nowhere to be found. "Daddy, I didn't want you to be mad that my shoe was off, so I threw it out the window." Made sense to a 5-year-old, I guess. My brother couldn't remember the proper name for shoes, so he called them foot houses. Mum confirmed that day that at least one of her teenage children was a bit doughy up top. My son came to our house to visit. He didn't live with us. We weren't home, but we on our way home, so he let himself in. We walk in, and he's freaking out about breaking our newly adopted cat or something to that effect. I asked him what was she doing. She looked fine to me. He said she was vibrating when she sat on his lap. This is where he learned about cats purring. He hadn't been around a lot of cats, so IDK. Edit. I'm so glad others have experienced this. He is definitely not an idiot, but some of the things he comes up with has us shaking our head. My 14 years old son went into a dressing room to try on 5 pairs of pants. After waiting 15 minutes and yelling twice into the men's dressing room to see if it was okay, he admitted he could find the shorts he had worn in. He gave me 3 pairs of the pants and still couldn't find them. I finally had to go into the stall to look. They were balled up in the leg of one of the pair of pants. It was extremely noticeable. He swore he took his shorts off before trying on any of the pants, so he didn't think to look in them. I was speechless. He's in the gifted and talented program in our school district. When my son was 11 years old, he confidently informed me he was pretty sure he knew everything there was to know, because he tried to think of something that he didn't know, and couldn't think of anything. When the Peter Pan peanut butter recall happened 10 to 12 years ago or so due to salmonella, my then 15-year-old daughter came in from school, and as she was walking past the living room TV was on, she stopped and watched the news report about the salmonella outbreak. She got this aha light bulb moment and said, "Oh, now I get it. It's about peanut butter." All day at school I kept hearing Peter Pan was killing people around the country, and I thought he had turned bad or something, and was now a villain. I just stared at her waiting for her to say she was joking, and didn't really think Peter Pan was real, but no, she just went upstairs to her room like we just had a normal conversation about normal, everyday events. When my youngest son, who was 10 at the time, was getting his ears checked at the pediatrician, and they found a foreign object in his left ear. Said object was a dead housefly, because he thought sticking a fly in his ear would give him flying powers. He had caught it and shoved it in there alive about a week prior. I'm the idiot kid, but when I was about 3, after preparing dinner, my mom would leave me alone in the kitchen. After I finished, I would search for some M&Ms to nibble at, knowing I wasn't allowed. Every time after I finished, I would go over to my mom and ask her, "Did you hear me eating M&Ms in the kitchen?" She would always reply yes, and I would always get so frustrated because every time I tried to be as stealthy as possible, I never realized what blew my cover until I grew older. A few weeks ago my son decided to use the lip of the tub to walk on while he was taking a shower. After he slipped the first time, he decided that he was going to be very careful when walking on the lip of the tub. From then on he was okay though. When they act just like me. When I saw a video of her riding an alligator. Daughter calls me, "There is a cop behind me with his lights on. What should I do?" Told my kid that carrots help you see in the dark. He then went into the basement with a carrot and started waving it around like a flashlight. One day after school my brother and I met up with my dad. He worked at the school and the janitor, and began walking to the parking lot. We passed the elementary building, and the janitor lets out a huge sign about some punk writing their name on the facade. My dad looks over and said it's the same name as my kid, but at least his name is spelled differently, since it has a C in it. Loud gasped my brother. I forgot the C. He was not the sharpest tool in the shed. My mother called me in tears from laughing and told me that my sister, 5 years younger than me, probably 16 at this time, had just asked her, "I know this might be a silly question, but what's brathood?" My mom is like, "My sister thought that the brought to you by message when watching TV was brathood, one word, and she had wondered about it for her whole life pretty much." Let me preface this by saying my son is actually brilliant, especially when it comes to computers and music, and I love him more than life itself. However, when he was in 9th grade, reading A Tale of Two Cities, he complained to me that he was having a problem with the book, because whenever he would pick his book up to continue reading it, he had to figure out where he left off last time. I was like, if only we had the technology, a way to mark the last place we read in a book, it would be so much easier. Then I found an index card for him to use as a bookmark. In all honesty, I really felt for the poor kid. He was never an enthusiastic reader to begin with. I've always been an avid reader, and even I struggled with Dickens all the way through college. I will answer in my parents' stead. This happened embarrassing recently. When talking about World War II, I mentioned that the attack on Pearl Harbor was so unexpected because no one thought the Japanese would sneak up all the way around the US. People were nodding knowingly until one girl pointed out that despite the map I was pointing to in setting Hawaii to the east, it was actually in the Pacific.